Hi, today I'm sitting down with Kacey Felila-Tolua. She is you're a seasoned executive leader with 30 years of experience in contact centers, transforming customer experience and large scale operations. You spent the last 18 years at Marriott and eBay launching AI channels and CRM global solutions. You're very well known for your inclusive, human-centered leadership and ability to guide organizations through complex transformations with clarity, heart, and measurable results. Thanks so much for joining me, Kacey.
Thank you, Kate. I think the first time we met was at CCW in New York City. Is that right?
Yeah,
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 that was really fun. It was such a beautiful place and what an experience. So it's nice to be able to visit with you again.
yes, absolutely. Because we're both members of CC Women.
Yes.
So I had just joined at that time. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. You have so much experience, unique types of experience. What stands out to me about you is that your entire career, you've been handed tech projects where some leader was like, here's the project, run with it, figure it out, and come back to me. What patterns, that said, what patterns have you seen with how companies approach new technologies, and what patterns are you seeing? Are there similar patterns with AI?
Wonderful. Well, I would say I have spent the last 18 years on the tech side. However, I did come from the operational side and the training and quality to begin with. So I think maybe later on we'll talk a little bit more about the different perspectives that I've had. But absolutely, I'm going to go ahead and answer that just around the technology side. And I think boy, patterns are tough, right? They become that habitual thing. And I think they say if you do something for so many times, it just becomes a habit. And so some of the patterns that I've recognized is companies do not want, they want to hold on to the old. And so they're reluctant to start to step into a new space when there's been an investment. And the way that attrition works is you may have leaders who purchased the original technology and they're already gone. And so the new ones don't really want to make a change. So part of that is just what typically when you look at the low hanging fruit of a hero's journey, a lot of new leaders don't want to rock the boat and immediately jump in and say, we should rip out everything and then replace it with something new. So I would say it's very easy. That's one reason why folks want to hold on to the old. It could just be change resistance. It could be budget. It could be the inability to have proven an ROI ahead of time, but definitely wanting to hold on to what that we already have. I also think that it's getting stuck on prior versions. So I talked about the ROI. If a company has purchased an older version and it costs to purchase the next version up, if there wasn't enough ROI to prove it out, companies tend to get stuck on those older versions. And so it's really, really hard to prove out something new because demos would look differently at that point. I would also say that anytime a new solution comes up, the engineers always want to say, I can build this. I understand the business. Let me build it for you. It would be way cheaper than what it would take for you to buy. And I would say in some instances, it could work. In most, it may not. And I had a custom applications team in a former role, and they were fantastic. They went in and did so many things that address the global solutions. Not all companies get that lucky to have that level of expertise and the ability to adapt with custom applications. And so typically companies want to stay with the bigger enterprise solutions. And so that's a different change. I'm just thinking about other things. Historically, pilots have been really long. So it's like we should run a we should definitely run a 12-month pilot. And if it works, then next year we'll sign up for the full budget. And I think that where AI projects come into place now, you don't have to do such a long running pilot. You can get data in a much shorter time frame and results and be able to feed that back in. And so that is something that assumptions tend to be difficult for some companies to say, I don't know, could we really get results in less than that amount of time for like a 1 year pilot? And then I
Yeah.
would say the excitement around AI is huge. So everybody wants it. They love the things that they've seen. And some companies tend to have a pattern of, well, then the AI and the technology is going to solve everything. And then they lose sight of the internal things that still need to be addressed. AI can only work so well if the data exists, if the APIs exist,
Absolutely.
if we have old processes or old policies that will continue to drive a negative CSAT or a negative NPS, then it doesn't get better. It can get better in some areas, but ultimately there are foundational things that still need to be owned by the companies that AI cannot just come in and fix. So those are some ideas
Yeah.
around the pattern recognition of what I would
Yeah.
say.
So you said a couple things that stood out. So proving AI or proving ROI on AI is hard. And you were talking about low hanging fruit. In your experience, where would, if a leader were to go and propose something to, executive leadership, or if they were giving a project, hey, go implement AI, what are some areas they could look in to find that low hanging fruit that would be, they could do the shorter pilot and prove ROI and then kind of scale from there?
So, Kate, one of the things that I see is that everyone commits to answering that question before anything is even launched. And what I have found is AI can actually give the data and the information. That's the value at the very beginning to make data-driven decisions. And then, depending on each scenario or each organization and what those use cases are, things will surface differently. So in some, it will be like absolutely low hanging fruit is the efficiency. So we're going to lower AHT. Others will be we're going to increase CSAT. Others will be we're going to increase our revenue, our ARR, those types of things. It depends on what the data brings back to tell us where can we make a mark, where can we make differences. And what I love is that although AI is the technology side, AI will give us information around this looks like a policy challenge. This looks like a technology challenge. And this looks like a behavioral challenge that seems to be driving a lower CSAT. So the win for the low hanging fruit for me tends to always be the information that's specific to that company.
I love that's spot on because you can't make strategic decisions and really be intentional about where to do an AI transformation without having the data and information up front. And hey, that's one of the things that AI is great at. You were talking about something else really interesting. I've talked to multiple leaders who either say, hey, we want to only build internally or we want to purchase externally. Is there, in your opinion, a way to tell when building internally is feasible, when it would work, and when you should buy off the shelf? Or is it really, does it depend on the company and the team that would be building it?
It does depend on the company. However, there are certain factors to look at. So, looking at what are the current contract timeframes, and so when does renewal come up? If renewal doesn't happen for another 4 years, then you're probably not wanting to, unless you're really, really hurting, it would be hard to sell, let's pay for the old for the next 4 years and the new just to replace it. So I would say time frame around contracts is one thing. The other is what is the impact? And so although AI is exciting and a lot of AI technology solutions will come in with a full end-to-end solution, ultimately, whatever exists today covers some of those solutions. So it's looking at the gap to say, do we do just the new that the AI solution can offer, or do we replace everything end to end? And then going back to what would we get out of it? And so if you have a very unique set of frontline agents that could really leverage that, if they're driving the 1 to 2% of revenue for the whole company, that's worth it. If it is only addressing new hires and your attrition is not really an issue, then it's probably not going to be worth the value add. The other thing is just taking a look at how fast do you want to go in your 3-year plan. And I would say that's another thing, going back to the patterns, is defining a 5-year plan kind of doesn't really exist anymore for a lot of companies, because technology will change significantly between now and then. So it's better to kind of pull that in just as much as the pilots you can pull in. You can pull in those areas. So yes, I would say it does vary for every company, but taking a look at what are you investing versus what you're going to get out of it, and how does that overlap with your current solutions? Again, you can use those custom application teams that can fill the gap until you get to that point, but and maybe you'll hang on to some of those long term anyway. That's why I say process has a huge part in the overall solutions, because if AI technology is asked to solve for every single edge case, that makes it challenging. And so you want to push your organizations to streamline and standardize and optimize your processes as much as possible to open the door for those things.
Right. Because you don't always know if, hey, is this a gap that AI can fill? Is this a process problem? Is this a people problem? Is this a workflow problem? You don't know until you dig in. And another thing that I've heard from so many leaders and just in general is that so many vendors, this is such a new space that every a lot of vendors look the same. AI's new, so the way that they're presenting it looks really similar. We don't have enough to base what's baseline, what does normal look like, and then how do I compare it? We don't really have that. So I've been asking people whether you've implemented AI or just evaluated, which, it sounds like you've had experience doing both. When did you realize that the vendor pitch versus reality were two different things? What happened? Where was the gap there?
I do love this area. I love talking to anyone. If they've only had a solution that's been out for 6 months, or they've been in the industry for a long time, I love having conversations with everyone because I get to learn. And you are right. When the demos come into play, you can tell sometimes they're not actually using a live environment and it ends up being vaporware. And so that's a challenge, where it's just something that they've built in a very concentrated environment and it isn't something that's actually been deployed. So if you're supporting 60,000 frontline agents, you don't want a little demo that is only using data in a concentrated area where the latency, the stability, the accuracy looks really good because you've already programmed in those scenarios that look like they're impromptu, versus what it would take for a global scale of implementation and different languages. And then I would say that typically companies that will bring in their sales team and are willing to have their implementation team on the same calls is a good indicator, because it isn't just the sales pitch. You've got other people who are willing to back it up, who have worked with different clients, who have said, we actually saw this challenge. And so when we have skeptical questions and what about this or what about that, the implementation team is able to answer those things that maybe the sales isn't into the details as much. And then I will say that I tend to see a lot of standardized PowerPoint decks that maybe they forgot to replace the company name and it says someone new. You really want those companies that will invest in customizing a deck to each organization's needs. So what is it in the conversations that have been built up to being able to schedule the demo? What have been the pain points that that organization is solving for? What are the things that they've already implemented? And to acknowledge that progress and then come in with a demo to say, hey, we think that we can close the gap. We believe that we could provide a solution that would be worth it for you to replace everything. Those to me are the ones that there's a big difference on the reality check between demo versus what you could foresee in the future for a full implementation.
Yeah, because you're right. If they're not willing to put in, and this goes for anything in life and business, if they're not willing to put in the effort up front when they're trying to win you over and on their best behavior, what is it going to look like when you've actually bought the product and you need support and you need things to be customized? And I think that when you're looking at a long-term partnership, asking for a custom demo and for a custom deck isn't that much to ask for. You need to go
No,
into it eyes wide open. And, that's something that I sit down with leaders and help them do is figuring out business requirements and making those structured use cases and structured, demo RFPs. But for somebody who's doing it themselves, would you recommend that somebody sits down and comes to a vendor and says, hey, we've identified how we want this demo to flow. Here's the structure we want. Or would they go to the vendor and say, hey, I want something custom. Can you sit down with me and we'll build the custom use case together? Or is it just some of both?
I really like to test the platform solutions that come in the door. If I have to hand hold someone on how to do everything, I really want to see how they'll do it on their own because it helps me understand how involved are they willing to be, how much are they willing to invest. Now, if we get through where I'm like, I'm willing to stand behind you, and we're down to 3 in an RFI, RFP process, absolutely I will make sure they put their best foot forward. But on the initial, I'm like, this is up to you. You tell me how you can solve for our organization.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are on the same page about a lot of things. And in more or less words, you kind of, when you go into these, you want to be able to poke holes or find where the gaps are in the pitch and the solution. So what I've noticed is there's a big difference between, I met with a vendor one time and we were talking about the demo that they would present to the client. And they were saying, oh yeah, we integrate with X technology. And I was like, oh, great. How many times have you integrated with them before? Well, we haven't yet, but we're pretty sure we can do
Oh,
that. And I'm
good.
like, whoa, there's a huge difference between, yes, we've integrated with this technology before and have been successful, and we're pretty sure we could. We haven't yet, but we're pretty sure. You need to be transparent about that. Have you seen anything like that? Or my favorite is, oh, it's on the roadmap. It's like,
Yes.
whoa, that road could be really long. When is that going to actually arrive?
Yes. I mean, in 30 years, you're going to see those types of, you'll see all different types of scenarios. So, yes, one of the things is that a lot of partners, and I'll say vendor partners, a lot of vendor partners will allow you to meet with some of their other clients. And so you can have a discussion with some of their other clients without them on the call, and they'll give you their feedback. What I would say is I like to do my homework, and part of the networking, and that's something that CCW does really well, is being able to offer the networking so that I can meet my own folks in each of those other companies and say, hey, give me the down low. What is that? And if they say, that was a very small use case, like we have a very large volume. We actually allowed them to come in and do a very small segment of work. That's really helpful to understand because you can get a different view on. So I think that's one of the questions to ask is at what scale have you implemented in these other areas? Is it just a specific channel? Was it the easiest channel? Was there any human interaction on those? Because to me, I'm very passionate about, yes, we want AI powered in as many places as possible, but ultimately it needs to be an AI powered to the human touch, to the human interaction. So if the demos are only around the non-human interaction, then that's important to keep in mind. What does each organization want to focus on, and what are their values, and what are their priorities, and what are the KPIs that they're looking for the end of each year?
Yeah, and show me that example, because you kind of touched on it earlier. A tool that works really well with a support team of 500 agents is much
Right.
different than 5,000 agents. And what works right now, will it work when we scale? There's hyper growth companies that could be, 3 times the size in 3 years. What does it look like now? Can you scale? And another thing is, you come from a background where you've worked for global companies. So, yes, this tool works in the US, but what does it look like in Europe? And what does it look like in Australia? Does it still work? Or would I have to get a different solution in those geos? So, that's all great points. Another thing, Casey, that you had mentioned, and I think this goes for any technology project, but AI projects require a team to back you. It's not a one-person project. You need executive leadership buy-in. People all need to be focused on one goal. You need to have them supporting you, and frontline agent input. In your experience, which of those is usually the hardest to align when it comes to this? Casey, another thing that I think is unique about you and that I want to hear more about is that with any tech project, especially AI projects, it's critical that you have a team backing you. It's not a one-person project. You need executive leadership buy-in, and you need frontline agent input and buy-in there as well. In your experience, which one of those is most difficult to get aligned?
I think what I'll say is any of those could be the most difficult, but I'll share with you why some of those will be difficult or could be difficult. One of the things that I've learned that when you go through an RFI, RFP process, we're supposed to include everybody and all teams. I have yet to see where all teams come together and join all of the demos and provide all of their feedback on time and truly understand what it is that they saw. And so I would say, let me just start here. So I'll start with the mid tier. The mid tier in operations are your frontline managers. And what I find there is there's a lot of resistance because they want to protect the frontline agents from too much change. So it isn't a bad thing, but it is definitely something that you can possibly hear throughout those entire processes, because they will be the ones that want to advocate and say that's too much, it would be too hard. And interestingly enough, sometimes the frontline agents are more open to the changes because they understand the longer impact of the full end to end. So that's where I would say mid tier, because they love the frontline agents. We all should. That was one thing that I would think of. And then when I think about the frontline agents, I love how passionate our frontline agents are. The minute that we say, hey, we would like to roll out a new AI solution or a new enterprise-wide technology solutions, they all go out to Google and they all start searching, what does this mean? What does it
Yeah.
look like? And so then I get these really skeptical, critical questions around AI when we join, and we're like, well, we don't actually integrate with those platforms. And so there's a fear. And the thing that the frontline agents don't want is they don't want to fail. They don't want to be exposed for not providing great customer experience. They want to hit their metrics. And so all of those things are important, but they also don't, they feel a responsibility to be educated before they come in. And what I love is the right AI solutions that come in are the ones that help you learn. It's kind of a safer space. Like, you don't have to know anything. You don't have to know all of these technical words. We're going to teach you and we're going to learn together. So there's ways to caveat those things, but those are the mid tier and then those frontline agents. And I would say it's interesting that I've seen organizations across the board where the C-suite is like, "Yep, we're in, we want it." And the opportunity is executives don't realize every cost that comes into play, and what the timelines are. And so it's ensuring, so I would say it can be the most difficult, but you can change that by communicating up front, by sharing all those things, by not letting just a sales pitch be a highest number, but really communicating, this is what it will take for a one time, this is what it will take for renewals, these are the licenses that you will need. And being able to explain all of those really keeps everyone on the same page. And then I would say the AI is so complex that I find the critical area is InfoSec. So being able to say, these are all the data security, the PII, these are all the things, GDPR, everything that we need to account for. That is where I find a lot of the hangups is they have responsibilities that are in black and white. And if the AI platform solutions do not meet all of those, they cannot approve them. So I find most of the work, and in those areas, it's much harder to predetermine what would those questions be. And so they kind of come up as you go along the way for a first time AI implementation. The second time, the hope is that you've documented every single question that came up and you're able to speak to it and to prove that out. And so you've got network, you've got all of those areas and the integrations, and I would say that's probably the hardest. And the best part about all of these is that no one has ill will or an ill intention to not deploy a new solution that's going to be better for the company. It is that everyone has a specific role and they do it with such due diligence that as an implementation and a technology leader, it's our responsibility to partner with operations to make sure that everyone is crystal clear through the process and it's communicated, and that your vendor partners are as forthcoming to enable you to be successful so there aren't those little surprises that come up.
Yeah, and you mentioned two things that stood out to me. I didn't even think of asking or having on a standard list of questions for potential vendor partners. Hey, what issues or what things have you come across, whether it's barriers or best practices with info security? Because it's not just like a couple companies that have infosec. It's across the board, everybody. So it's not like vendor partners have never come across, oh, wow, we didn't even have to think about this. So it's almost something that you could add when you're vetting or interviewing them up front and hear that. So then that way, you know already some of the answers or some of the insights or objections that your infosec team may have.
Yes, and going back to that, I feel like there are RFI and RFP templates that everyone's supposed to fill out all the questions, but a good interactive demo and going through those processes, new questions will arise. So you won't be able to answer everything or ask everything on those templates necessarily on your first go around. It may take a couple rounds and a couple different vendor platform solutions to say, oh, this solution was, we were asking entirely different questions versus something else. So it's an evolution of being able to put those questions together and making sure to document so that you don't have to go around and around. I've worked with phenomenal teams who have documented out some of the best enterprise architectural diagrams, and they're reusable and you can quickly add where are the new integration points. It's just like a beautiful puzzle and then adding glitter on top.
I love glitter.
I do
Um,
too.
Kacey, I think my last question, and I'm really interested to hear your answer because you've seen this in so many different forms. If you could add an honest disclaimer to AI tools that vendors would never put on their sales decks or tell you, what would that be for people who are approaching this now?
I have never been in legal, but I feel like my response will be like a legal disclaimer that it'll be 4 pages long. So, can I just jump into it and I'll
Yeah.
just share a couple of them?
Yeah.
So, I would say when you are driving a car and it says objects in the mirrors may seem closer than they appear, I feel like it should also be the demo you are about to see may have features that are not yet live.
Yeah.
I would even say big annual flagship conferences where you see all the lights on stage and everything, they may not have actually deployed them, or they deployed them with one client enough to say we have deployed it. And so that would be my first one, is just everything that you see in the demos are not everything that you may get on day one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be one of the things, is being able to ask about scale. And you mentioned that earlier, to what scale did you already deploy this? How many, at what point in the year did you deploy this? So how long has it been out there? What have been the metrics that have come back? And was that against 300 agents, or was it against 10,000 just to start as a pilot? Because if you're running a 60,000 agent, head count, then
Yeah.
that's going to be very different. The other disclaimers I think are, vendors will not, they want you to, but it would be you as a company will have to put in the work. And I have seen that over and over again, that they companies must use the data, they must provide the inputs to the accuracy, and they must sell the value of what they get back. So AI has a plethora of data. They do data stitching, they're showing all of these things, there's dashboards. But if the company sits back and waits and says, AI's got this, that's the thing that AI solutions will not be as successful in, because the companies have to lean in. They have to be involved. They have to provide those inputs, and they have to use the data. And if there is data that is not meaningful, they need to advocate and say, this is actually not an area that we thought, that we had hoped we would get more information, but it isn't very meaningful. So really being able to focus on the priorities and what are the things that will drive and move the needle on those core metrics and deliverables. I would also say, some of the best AI platforms partners out there make AI so user friendly that conversations can happen with operations directly. And it's awesome, because the operations leaders are like, well, my frontline agents want this and we want that. And what would be really great, and those are wonderful, but what I would say is, time and time again, it's important for the technology team internally for companies to be involved and engaged up to the launch and up until it moves to run the business or business as usual. That tends to be where a lot of the issues come in, because operations tends to get the front facing solutions, but there's a lot of integration that goes behind the scenes, and the technology teams may know about moving to a different tech stack or moving to different APIs. And if the rest APIs aren't there, then operations won't get what they want. So there needs to be that liaison and partnership across operations, internal technology, and the vendor platform partners until it's stabilized. And then at that point, I think it is a value add if AI solutions can be more user friendly on the front end for operations to take and drive.
Yeah. You made a really good point that even the best vendor partner in the world can only do so much on their end. So when companies and leaders are approaching this, they need to understand that not only is there a monetary investment, but there's a meaningful, significant time investment and effort on their end, because it's a two-way street. You don't just go, all right, here's AI, ta-da, it all works out. it's a collaboration. There needs to be open communication, and whoever's going to manage this going forward, the technology team, operations, needs to be in constant communication. So it's almost like if you purchase AI, but a company's not willing to put in that work, you're setting the vendor partner up for failure because they can only do so much on their end. I love that.
Another thing is that I work a lot with data science and predictive analytics in those areas, and it is up to the company to help advocate and make sure that everyone is fully aligned on data sources and that the data integrity exists. One of the worst things that can happen is a vendor platform partner can come in, show all this data, and then you have another team over here holding on to their old data sources, and they say the numbers don't match up. So that means that the AI solution is inaccurate. That's just an example of why everyone needs to be talking at the same time together until you get things stabilized so that you can pitch back up to your C-suite. We are delivering, we are moving the needle, and here's how we can prove that. So that's just one example.
Casey, your insights and experience has been so invaluable, and I can't wait to share this with everybody. As final thoughts, is there anything you're working on or any events you're going to be at or anything you'd like to promote?
I am on some speaking sessions that are coming up. I will be at CCW in Las Vegas, which is their annual flagship, and I will be speaking there. I am excited because I am a CC Women Hall of Fame from a few years ago. And so being able to meet everyone, I would love to meet anyone new. So if they're going, that would be fantastic for introductions and to come and say hello. I am on LinkedIn, and that's the best place to get a hold of me. But right now, I am just focusing on where my next adventure is in my journey.
And wherever you land is going to be, you have such a plethora of value. We've talked about it in this last 45 minutes. And so, Casey, I am so grateful for your time and thank you so much for spending time with me. And I can't wait until next time I get to see you.
Well, I look forward to seeing you too, Kate. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.